You are listening to Catholic Family Podcast.
Welcome to Catholic Family Podcast. I'm Lisa Davis, and I'm here today with three of my daughters to talk about small children in church. It's a topic that comes up a lot. It's a struggle that everybody has, every family with small children and infants and teenagers and everybody in between. That how do you train them? And what are the lines in the sand? What is appropriate and what isn't appropriate, and what should you let your child get away with, and what shouldn't you let your child get away with? And we think it's just a lot of topic for discussion. And perhaps amongst the group of us, we can come to some conclusions about what works, methods that we've tried that have been successful, and methods that have not been successful. So I wanted to start off by asking, well, I'll introduce everybody first. This is my daughter, Michelle.
Hi.
Our oldest daughter, Michelle. Can you tell us how many children you have?
So I have 4 going on 5, and we typically have 3 in church, 1 in the cry room. And their ages are 5, 4, 3, and 1. So they're all pretty close. And then I'm due in May, so we'll be adding another little one to the cry room. But yeah, always entertaining, always interesting. That's pretty much my story. A lot of little ones.
Stair steps.
Yep.
And Catherine?
Hi. I just have the one. She's 1 year old, so she's pretty much strictly in the cry room, and then we're expecting our second pretty soon. So yeah, I'm gonna be stuck in the cry room for a little bit, I think.
And Monica?
I have 2 right now. So I've got Margaret, who is 3, and then my other one who's about 1.5. The 3-year-old is in and out of church, and the 1-year-old is pretty much in the cry room. So
Right, yeah. And I think it's fair to say too that it's not just these moms who do the cry room. Dads are in and out. Dads are helping with them too, which is so important. So nice to have. I guess the first question is, if you're starting with infants, I think most of us know that a very small infant is in the church without a whole lot of trouble. They're usually pretty easy to keep quiet. Yeah.
newborn.
Yeah.
Unless they're hungry.
Yeah.
Right. When do you know? When do you guys have any ideas or just tips that when to know it's time to move from the church and it's just time to go into the cry room, if you have a cry room? And I guess we should make that observation too, that not every church has a cry room. I mean, we're blessed to have a cry room, and in Omaha we have a good sized cry room and a good sized vestibule with a window so that we can see into the church. And I know that there are several. I know Minnesota has a gorgeous cry room. I know in Denver they have a nice cry room, but there are several churches that don't. So that there are other issues that you have to address when you don't actually have a cry room, and we need to get into that too. But if you do have a cry room or the ability to go into a vestibule, when do you think is the best time? How do you know?
I'd say when they start showing their own wills more. Like 6 months is, for me, like typically when we move to the cry room, but it depends on the kid. But I'd say like when they have their own little temper, their own little voice, and they like to make their voice heard, I'd say at that point it's safe to move to the cry room. But maybe you have a kid that just is quiet and doesn't make noise. Can't say I've had one. You never know. You could go longer. Maybe you have a child who is super fussy and colicky and nurses for the entire mass. Then in that case, you need to go sooner. But I'd say for me, generally 6 months is typically an age that we would move.
Yeah, that sounds right. It's been a long time since I
I would say too, like if you have a child who will take a passy, or even possibly a bottle, or a blanket, or whatever, something that might literally be their off switch.
Right.
Like obviously besides nursing, my children have been strictly nursed, and they did not ever take a passy. They would only take a bottle when it came time to like be sleep training them, way later down the line.
Yeah.
They would not even consider any other form of pacification besides nursing. So if there was any sort of noise that they would have, I was out of the cry room a lot sooner than I think most people were, because they would just be cooing or cawing, or they're hungry, just making enough noise, and it was just like, we're just
time to go.
Goodbye. Yep.
Right.
Time to go.
Yeah.
And that's something too. I think that I have to tell you, I remember one time early on. Okay, so this would have been the 80s, and I would have been a teenager, and moms didn't nurse; they did bottles. I mean, my first couple children, people thought I was crazy because everybody did bottles still. This is how old I am. But I remember one time a mom came in and sat in front of my dad, and she was discreet, okay, but she started nursing in the pew, and I thought my dad was going to have a heart attack right there in the church. I mean, he was like, and that is an issue too. I mean, it's you can be so discreet, but everybody knows what you're doing. And I think now, I know that it can vary, but I have actually asked religious about this.
Okay.
And I don't, because people around you know what you're doing, it can be a scandal to them, especially if you got older men. I'm sorry, it's just true.
Yeah.
And it can be a distraction, unless you can be super stealth, but people still know. It's just in general, and there are churches and chapels where it's a little bit more of the culture, especially very small ones, and it's all family. But it is something to be very aware of. And if you have a question at all, talk to your pastor, and that's always the question. Ask your pastor. But the religious that I have spoken to have said, the thing that you have to remember is that church is not your living room. And it's, of course, no problem nursing in your living room. But church is a step above. It's if you went to visit the Queen of England and were sitting in state at the Royal Palace, would you nurse your child?
I would.
I think so.
I have to disagree.
I don't know. I have the.
Well, all right, forget the Queen of England.
I don't know. I think even if the Blessed Virgin Mary, I mean, I guess if you have a cover, and it depends, it varies from church to church, from mom to mom.
It does.
But I think if you have a good nursing cover and you are not showing anything, I truly don't think it's bad.
Well, I would say maybe it wouldn't be appropriate if you're in the very front of the church.
Well, if you're in the back,
if you're in the back,
if you're in the
no
back,
one is directly
I would still,
by you. I don't know. I guess.
I think it's.
I will say I have nursed in the church.
I have too. So
especially if it's an emptier church.
Never thought about it as much as
well, if it's a weekday mass, etc.
Yeah,
I would, but I guess the point would be, discretion is the better part of valor always.
Right.
And in mass, the dignity of the mass is more important than anything else. It's more important than anything else, especially if you have a cry room. Now, here's the problem. If you are at mass and you have 5 children and an infant, and are you going to bring them all into the cry room? Or are you just going to discreetly nurse?
Right.
I get that.
Right.
I
Sometimes
totally
it's like,
get that.
what's the worst distraction?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it's going to be, you know what? If my dad is sitting behind you, don't do it. Just don't do it. You don't want people to be have a temptation to anger or scandal. I mean, and you really don't. I mean, you don't want to be the cause of that. You never in life. Try really hard not to be somebody else's cross. Okay. And this is it's you're doing your job as a mom. You're taking care of your child, and it's hard. I know. I totally been there, done that. But I would say that discretion is extremely important. And if, like you said, empty church.
Yeah.
Nobody's around you. You've got a really good cover. I could see that, but always you should ask your priest if you have any question at all about it. You really should ask the propriety of your pastor. But and sometimes that is the way to keep them quiet.
It's like, well, you
this is a way of keeping everybody happy. I get it, but there's the other question about the low babbling baby noise. All right, everybody knows when the baby's screaming, you take the baby out. If you have a baby that you know is going to be screaming, you take the baby. You just start in the cry room. just started.
We were doing imitative baby noises. Teapot whistled.
We're brewing tea, in case anybody wondered. And my wonderful husband grabbed it. Thank you. Everybody knows when the baby's screaming, you take the baby out. But I guess the question is too about the constant. If you've got somebody that just babbles, if you've got a baby that just it's cute and all, but what are your thoughts about that one? I mean,
Be more.
I feel like if she's loud and to a point where I feel like people 2 pews in front of me can hear her, then I take her out. And I think too when she's gonna get loud, like if she sees someone she knows and it's just like, okay, this is we're done, we're gonna leave. But I feel like really if it's quiet enough that 2 pews in front can't hear her, or she's that's a good measure.
Mm-hmm. That's a good measure.
But even then I feel like she's always been pretty loud, so
it doesn't
it doesn't take long before I think it's gonna get louder. So
I think that kind of leads to something that a priest told me that and something that struck me because I never thought about it this way before, that if there is a level of noise and distraction in the church such that he is really distracted, you can affect the validity of a mass. Mm-hmm. That you can throw off a consecration, and you have to be extraordinarily mindful of why we're there. That it is everything that we do should be in mind of the sacredness of the Mass and of the Holy Eucharist, and what is actually going on. I mean, everything else is beyond that. It's subservient to that. It doesn't matter. It's about the dignity of the Mass. It's about, we're there for our Lord. So if you, one of the fathers told me, he says, it's sometimes the constant shushing is worse than the noise. Mm-hmm. So when you're going, shh, he says sometimes that's worse. So be aware of that too. And sometimes it's just a matter of, take them out and being in the back of the church. And if if the baby is, you can't hear them 2 pews, then you're probably okay because Father can't hear you.
And if you stay in the back of church, that's kind of obvious maybe, but important, because if you have a child who could possibly make noise, you want to be in the back of church.
Get out
you can get out faster and you're not leaving a trail of noise.
I know. Do you know what you call that? You call that the broken parachute scream. When they and usually there's the silence of shock, and then you got to run out the church before they get their breath. So if you sit in the back, you have a better chance of getting out before they get their breath.
Right.
But sorry. I think that it's important to know. I mean, your own children. And there are some amazing families, and there's a particular family at our church that just is awesome, that they've got all the kids right in the very front pew, and they train them very, very well, and they're extremely well behaved, and they've done a really good job of training these children all the way down to like 2 years old. And mom's in the cry room with the infant, but all the rest of them are in the very front pew because they know that they've worked on it to the point where they can be in the front pew.
Right. I think that's ideal when you can be at that point. Yeah. I know, like my husband's family, that's how they did. They all had their younger kids even in the front row, because it's also just less distraction for the child. You can be right in the center and you can just see the altar instead of watching this little kid and making faces at this little kid. And so I think that it's helpful for the child. I
think so too.
And it's a good goal. And you also feel all the eyes behind you, and knowing that your parents would be, horrified if everyone is watching you.
Father's right there.
That's right. God's right there. Yeah. It's true. But make sure you're ready before you do that. I mean, that's and we were talking earlier about how important it is. We were talking to Monica's mom about one of the most important things that she thought, and I agree 100%. You don't start training your children to behave in mass. You start at home. Yeah.
Definitely. yeah, they need to know what's acceptable outside of church before they go into church.
Right.
Because if you don't have that at home, they're never gonna do it in church.
Yeah. Right.
So
And
it's
for young children, you can't just throw something on them, being like, I'm expecting you to behave like this, and I'm going to be very strict about it. And you just do it once a week. That's not going to stick in any toddler's head whatsoever. You have to be consistent for sure. And, you know, we're blessed to be able to go to mass at least once during the week to where we have that little bit where it's just the school week. It's not like it's the Sunday mass, so it doesn't feel as stressful, but you feel like you can maybe try to be in mass initially and see how they do, and then if it's too much, then you feel like you can leave. But
you're not missing mass.
You're not missing mass, and you feel like it's not as there's not as many people, so you have more space where you can be in the back. Versus sometimes if you get in late on Sunday, there's no space in the back pews, and you know with children you never know if you can get there early or not.
Yeah, I always think about too, like how if you were to set your child down, make them sit still for an hour, even at home, that's hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for kids, and they need to have the adjustment of like knowing that this is what is expected, but also being somewhat lenient and being like, okay, they are 2. You can't expect them to be still and perfect and church mice the entire mass. It's just not.
The point is you are training them.
Right, exactly.
They don't start out these perfect little altar boys, you know. You have to start out training. That's the beauty of that. The cry room is a great place to start early training. You know, and that's why it's really nice to have little decorum in the cry room. Of course, we also know that is sometimes impossible. But it is a good place to start in your training. I mean, as you go, they get better. You work on it at home. You talk about it at home. You talk about how important it is to go to Jesus's house, but it is not a sudden, instantaneous. You're going to have perfect children, and you do have to work on it and work on it and work on it. But I think that it's very satisfying to sit in the back of the church and watch every kid. I'll watch the children and how much better they get sometimes.
Right.
As a grandma, I'm like, oh, you're being so good today.
Right.
But, yeah. I think there's the other really important question that, and I did consult with a religious about this too, that the worry that if you're out of the church too much, and sometimes you have to leave the cry room even because the child is crying is loud enough that there you can hear it in the building, or if you can't see it, or if you don't have a cry room,
it's too full.
or if it's too full, or if when are you missing mass? Are you missing mass? Should you stay in the building with a crying child, or because you're afraid that you're going to miss mass? And Father said that absolutely not. He said use your common sense. For one thing, you have to be careful about the validity of the mass, and not only distracting the priest, number one, distracting the priest, but also distracting the people around you. And you're really not getting anything out of it either. But you have to use your head. That it is appropriate. If it's appropriate to leave, then you leave. And it's not as if God does not understand. He's, he sees you every day of your life, and he knows that if you need to take the baby out, take the baby out. You have not missed mass. You have not missed your Sunday obligation if you are legitimately outside the church because you're caring for a child. It's an important thing to understand. I mean, even if you don't have a cry room and have to go in another building, you just do what you have to do. I mean, your job as a mom, I mean, God understands. The Blessed Mother is right there with you. Send your guardian angel to sit in the pew for you. And it's not something to be concerned about. Now, if it is something that you are worried, again, talk to your pastor about it. I've heard from several priests now that is actually quite all right. If you're taking care of your child, you have not missed mass. I mean, it's and it's good to, if you can, be in the cry room where you can see mass. And very often you can't hear it, but that's okay. You know what's going on. You are trying to attend in the best way possible. But you haven't missed mass. You don't have to confess it. You're okay. It's okay. You're doing your best. But
I remember having a conversation with a priest once, and it was along the same lines. And he said, like, if you have a priest over to your house for dinner and you need to leave the room to change a diaper or to, you know, nurse your baby or whatever, the priest will not look less of you because you have done that, because God has given you this baby to take care of. That is your number one job, taking care of this child. And so even if you might, you know, leave the priest for 10 minutes, that's your duty as a mom. So it's similar in church, I think. Like, God gave you this child, so you have to take care of your child. And if it means missing mass or missing 15 minutes of mass, like, God wants you to, because he's given you that child.
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's more important than, you know.
Yeah, it's your chief duty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and on that note, I know there is definitely some times where maybe we weren't able to make the weekday masses or something like that, where every Sunday I was in the cry room with a very distractible baby. And I felt like I wasn't going to mass for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we kind of hit a point where we were able and blessed to be in a situation where we were able to either split masses to where, you know, my husband would go to mass, he'd go to the first mass, and then I would bring the children. At the second mass, I would keep the older ones with me till about the gospel, and then they started getting a little restless. And then they would go back with, you know, or they would go downstairs or whatever with him or to the park or whatever. And then I would be able to actually attend mass. And that was something that not everyone has that, but if you can make out a deal of some sort, whether it's splitting masses or whether it's taking turns. I know you and Lewis do that.
Yeah, he watched her one Sunday and then I watch her the next, so that we kind of both know. Yeah,
well, and you feel like you're
at one.
You're each getting to attend mass.
Yeah. Which actually brings up another thing that we were talking with Lewis earlier today about the fact that a lot of dads don't want to go in the cry room. Understandably, you got nursing moms in there, and they usually like to stand in the vestibule if they can. That it is something that I hadn't actually thought about it until. Say hi, Dossie. I hadn't actually thought about it until Lewis had mentioned it. That there should be a certain amount of decorum, even amongst dads standing back there with small children in the vestibule.
Yeah, I've noticed it's really common for people to want to just chat during mass in the vestibule.
Right.
And I always get pretty irritated. Well, it's just, you know, it's like you're there for mass, you're not there to socialize. And
and if there's room in church and you don't have a kid and you're not sick, then there's no reason you should be in the vestibule.
Well, and get out of the way of the dads holding the babies.
Right.
Yeah, because then you're taking up a seat or room to kneel when you got parents holding kids that do need a seat. And,
Well, and you're still there to you know, participate in mass. That, and so even if you're in the vestibule, to the extent that you are able, or in the cry room, you should try to participate. You should be kneeling at the consecration. You should be, you know, behaving as if you are in the church. But I think that especially, God bless the teenagers, they get back there and they forget where they are, and they just sometimes I think need a reminder. But also just get out of the way of the parents, because moms and dads need the space. You're in the way. You got a screaming child being barreled down the aisle. You need to just move. You shouldn't be there anyway. But that's right.
Right. And I think he mentioned even too, just kneeling at the consecration, standing when you should, you know, just the basic. You're still in church. I mean, not technically, but
are you saying in the vestibule?
In the vestibule,
Yeah.
Right. You should still try, you know, as much as you're able. Yeah. Sometimes if you're holding a toddler,
it's really
holding
hard
toddler, or
hard,
if you're nursing or something. Obviously, that's not hard.
When you can, it's nice
Right.
to try to follow along as much as you can.
Right. Yeah. And I think that I think you're right though, that when you're standing in the vestibule, it doesn't feel the same as being in the church, even though when mass is going on, it should.
Right.
It really should, I think. But I wanted to bring up something else. Distractions for toddlers and small children, and what you think is appropriate and what you think is not appropriate, what to bring into the church and what works and what you think might be too much of a distraction and what might be just not respectful to our Lord, I think is how we have to think of everything that we do inside our Lord's house, is what's respectful to him. What do you guys have any thoughts on that one?
Okay, just on that note, I do want to bring up something that was actually another topic of debate on a mom's group, like a Catholic mom group, is the chew-on rosaries. What is your guys' opinion of those? The silicone, it's a cross, it's not a crucifix, and it doesn't have anything necessarily besides the shape of the rosary on it. What would your opinion be on it?
I think if it's not blessed, I think we have a kid rosary and Quinn uses it when we pray the rosary, and he doesn't always. I don't know. I think, in my opinion, I don't think it's bad as long as it's not blessed and you're trying to teach them how to use it properly.
Well, if they see you using it, that's what we do with Chloe, because we've got one and she sees us doing it. She wants to play with our rosaries. I'm like, no. So and it distracts her, and I think it's.
Do you feel like it gives them the idea that they can be biting on rosaries, not be respectful to rosaries, or do you think that once they transition from that toy rosary to that big kid rosary, that
I think you could make a break right there.
Right there.
Yeah, just
I think you could
cut it.
I think being comfortable around sacramentals is actually, personally, I think that's a wonderful thing.
I think so.
I think it's a good thing, but there should be a line in the sand at some point. Okay, you're not a baby anymore. We're going to give you a big kid rosary, and you don't put this one in your mouth.
Right.
I think. Well, and I think too. I mean, babies they will grow out of the chewing stage. Like you know, they're not gonna. Well, actually, no, because people still chew on their pens as adults, so maybe not.
Hopefully not their rosaries.
I don't know. Sometimes you might, you get those rosaries sometimes from the church, and they've got like the crucifixes. You might sit
been biting on this.
But no, that was. But anyways, general toys, like obviously handing your child a phone to play a game or electronic would be, in my opinion. No, if they're ill and maybe they're downstairs and they're a toddler and you could put a movie on and then maybe you can go upstairs and attend mass, maybe that would be a different situation.
In a whole other room.
And it's a whole
without
other room
children around you.
Without other children, but if it was in the cry room or in the vestibule or of course in the church, that would be obviously a no. Anything that's hard that will knock on the wooden pews or when dropped. Or one time I made the mistake of bringing a baby doll when if you pressed it, it would make sound. And it was like, and that goes back in the diaper bag and zip. So yeah, anything hard. I've seen there's so many nowadays, there are so many options for finding Catholic type toys, like little nun dolls, which, maybe you don't want them to be, I don't know, that would be to your own discretion if you felt comfortable with that, or little Jesus and Mary dolls or something, or saints, or you have the chew rosaries. You have a lot of things that are, or just like a little kitty cat. Like in the church, I don't like to have them have toys. But in the cry room, when they're still under 2, then I think that it's really nice because then they don't feel the need to be running around and especially playing with other children. They can still be entertained because they still need that stimulation. And then,
I'd say for little boys, like for Quinn, at least my son, we used to give him cars and dinosaurs. We cannot do that anymore. When he's like using the kneeler as a racetrack. But it's funny because my husband said he used to do the same thing, and his mom took away his cars and he started using his missile. So I don't know what she did about that. But so for my boy, I cannot give him cars or dinosaurs. But I think books are very helpful, like any age. Board books for 2 and under, regular books for 3 and up. I think we use those a lot and spice it up, change your books, every Sunday, get a new book. And I like the ones that, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with just mass books. Those are great. But they really like the saint books or the Bible books, ones with colorful pictures and a lot of different diversity just to literally keep them entertained.
Yeah.
And sometimes my 4 and 5-year-old will read the same book through the entire mass, so that can be very helpful.
Right. I think we have to bring up the subject of food, and that cry room. Yes.
I would say,
No.
I would say it depends on your child and depends on your situation. If you're able to have maybe a later mass where you can feed them a proper breakfast and get
That's
them
always
to
ideal. Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
eat well,
Yeah.
but if you have a child who either is just bad at eating, and in mass, they're hungry, and if you give them something that they'll sit there quietly and just munch on it, like, I think that as long as the choice of snack is important, something that isn't a big mess, isn't noisy, you're not giving them a bag of crinkly chips,
So I have a question about that in regards to something somebody said to me, that they don't like their children eating in the cry room. So when other people bring food in the cry room, it's a problem for them. And what do you do with that? I mean, it's
that's hard because
that's a hard one. That's a hard one.
1-year-old, she's gonna be hungry all the time, and if that's what you do to be quiet, I mean, I guess like you could bring her
bottles.
downstairs,
Bottles are the best.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Or a sippy cup if it's a small child, like under 2, sippy cup. But never in the church though. I mean, that's just like number 1 rule. That's just inappropriate, and it makes a mess. And you're teaching your child that that's okay.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to break them of that. So why
they'll be that teenager chewing gum.
Exactly.
That you
want to wrap. Yeah, no. And one of the rules that my mother taught me was don't start something you're going to have to break. And some things are really hard to break, so just don't go there to begin with. Don't start with the Cheerios in the church, and then you won't have to break them of the Cheerios in the church.
I did begin, like, my 1-year-old sometimes will still need some sort of sustenance because she's a picky eater. So sometimes I'll bring a cheese stick, which she'll eat half of it and then be done with it, and I'll put it away. My 3-year-old, I have definitely begun to. I felt like she was old enough and felt like it was one of those, like, no, you can wait until after mass, and she's taken it very well, and she is. She'll still ask for stuff when my other one is there, and it's generally like, we'll wait until after mass, and she's totally fine. So I think every family might be a little different. For the family who had the issue, I think it's the same deal as when you go to someone's house and they have different rules than you.
True.
It's this is what their mommy and daddy says that this is okay. This they kind of, and unless your priest says otherwise, of course you should always follow what your priest says. If that becomes a topic that is.
Right. Well, like, if they just don't want you to bring food in the cry room, if it's like, for instance,
signs
right,
no food.
Well, people don't clean up. I hate to say it, but it's happened in the past.
That's true.
They don't clean up after themselves. Were you guys there that one time that we went to the cry room and there was a fish wrapped up in a piece of paper in the cry room?
Well, that doesn't surprise me. I'm like, probably seen weirder.
Some
that was probably an adult.
Someone set it down and forgot about it. I don't know.
What on earth is that smell?
It smells so bad.
That's pretty funny.
Speaking of smells, did we want to talk about smells in the small cry room at all?
That is an issue too.
That can be.
Smells.
Yeah. So
especially a closed room.
Yeah, it's a small room.
No ventilation.
No ventilation. I think somebody had said that somebody had gone in ours and cleaned it up with tea tree oil and had done a really nice job of cleaning. I wonder if
or put an air freshener.
Having some
air
kind of
freshener.
essential oil diffuser or something.
Right.
It smells good. That's
and there's no reason that ask your priest if you have that problem in your church. Ask him if he minds if you bring a diffuser and just run it during. And it's better for everybody. I mean, you got a lot of germs. Especially this time of year when you've got colds, that and I think that you don't want it to be a horrible place to spend mass. You want to.
Well, that's a distraction in itself, especially if you have a very sharp sense of smell.
Yeah,
a lot of pregnant moms.
Oh my goodness. So what are you guys now? I have not been in a cry room for years and years and years. So tell me, what are the problems that you run into in cry rooms? How can we use them as a place to train the children, I guess is the question, and not just a romper room? Do you know what I mean?
Right. I think for me, like having other children constantly playing with my children is hard. And I'm not going to say my kids don't do it too, but you don't want them to think of it as a playroom.
Right.
And so trying to just literally keep your child right next to you or right in front of you is pretty like important, because you don't really want them playing and making noise and jumping off the kneelers and climbing up the kneelers, and it's just a bad atmosphere. And the other children see everyone else, and so they're gonna just do what everyone else does.
Right.
So if everyone else is acting like it's a playground, so will your child.
Right.
So I think if everyone just tried to make it seem like it's church, I think it would help a lot, because
Right.
you would all just have your children next to you and they wouldn't be running around playing with the others. And
Right.
so it's easier said than done.
Yeah. Well, they're kids,
Mhm.
and that's why they're in the cry room, because
Right.
they haven't figured out how to do this yet.
It's called
But
a cry
it's
room.
a cry room.
Yeah.
No, I think that was the same issue. Like, I mean, having a 3-year-old, I still was very recent, like, of getting into the whole, like, what are other moms doing? Like, what are they letting their child do? What should I be letting my child do? And just being completely new at it all. Just totally, there's not a book that's written about, cry room etiquette at all. So it's kind of like you're just gauging off of what other people do. And sometimes you'll be like, okay, like, I think that this is good for this child for right now. And then sometimes you'll see another family who has the child the same age who's acting perfectly in church. And then you're like, could my child do that? And then if you push them a little bit, you sometimes are surprised at what your child can do. Sometimes no. Sometimes you have a child who is just too rambunctious or has too much energy or whatever, and they need to, like, you still keep them contained, right? But in the cry room where they can maybe have their little toy or book, especially, something. But I think
And a lot of it is expectations.
Like, I was gonna say that. Just keep high expectations.
Yeah.
And they'll typically try and meet them.
Right. And it's not, I think it's so important too, that's not something, we said it already. Don't do it on Sunday morning. It's something you talk about all the time. And they know what mommy expects. I mean, I'd like to say you're going to the grocery store. They know how they're supposed to behave. They basically doesn't mean they're going to do it, but you keep trying.
Right.
If you never keep trying, they're never going to learn. It's the same thing in church. I mean, you keep trying, and eventually they catch on. They really do. It takes a while, but it's persistence, and it's mom can't give up. It's hard.
Well, I'd say too, the first 2 or 3 children are the hardest.
They're hard.
Because once you have that older child group set up, such as like Daria, Ella, where you have the older children who already have that training in place, the younger ones want to be like their older siblings. They look up to them. They say, that is how I'm supposed to act.
Right.
And it makes it actually where you can have even a younger child in there, because they see their siblings. They see, oh, this is what's expected of me.
Right.
And this is, versus if you have a 1-year-old, maybe a 2-year-old, they don't care.
No.
They don't care what you're doing or saying.
No.
Maybe if they have a friend sitting there and they're behaving, you can be like, look how good they're being. So
right.
It's the peer pressure.
Peer pressure can be very good.
Right. Totally.
It can be a good thing.
And bribery.
Yes,
I was gonna say, we've all talked about donuts.
The donuts.
Don't let your naughty kid have a donut after church, and that speaks novels. Goes a long way in following through with it, which is really hard.
That's the really important part.
That's true. And knowing that if they're in so much trouble that mom or dad has to take them out, that's a bad thing. I mean, that they have to feel it. They have to know that, don't incur the wrath of mom.
Right.
Especially an older child. I'm not talking about toddlers that we're training. If you've got a 5 or 6-year-old that's acting up and you have to take them out, they should know.
Yeah.
This is really bad. This is the most important thing we do all week. Don't blow it, because mom is going to be really mad.
That would be, that actually makes me ask that, like, and everyone's probably going to have their different opinions, but I would be curious what your guys' is on discipline during the mass. Not necessarily in mass necessarily,
like
but let's say spankings or smacks on the back of the head or the neck grip, the death grip on the
No,
neck.
with us, when my dad had this big old ring, and we didn't have to leave the church. He would just go back. Personally, I think that there are some kids that do need that never, ever, ever, ever in the church. I think, first of all, only my dad could get away with that. But I think that I don't think you need to do it. I personally think that anything that you can do for your children to make Mass a happy, blessed, wonderful thing, you should do. However, you do have those ringers. There are those children, but I tend to think that there are better ways, myself, of disciplining them than spanking them, especially on the church grounds. You don't want them to have a Pavlovian response to going to Mass. That as soon as they drive into the parking lot, they're like, "Oh, I hate this place." You don't want them to their hackles to rise, even if it's their own fault. Doesn't matter whether they deserve it or not. You want them to grow up thinking of Mass as a place of refuge and a place of peace, and a place where they feel loved and appreciated. And now I know that's hard. I get that, because you have some kids who are just stinkers sometimes. But I really believe that there are other ways of disciplining besides the spanking thing,
or even just a physical discipline versus.
Right. Well, yeah, just squeezing an arm and giving them the
I
look.
Flick. It's not like it hurts, but it just gets their attention.
It gets their attention, not hurting it. Yeah, not not like pulling your belt out.
Right.
But yeah, just squeezing an arm. But I think it's a good question.
Well, I remember personally having one experience, and I think my parents changed their tactics later on as they kind of had more children and had more experience. But there was one time where I don't remember what I was doing in Mass, but I was being naughty. I knew I was being naughty, and I was taken to the bathroom, got a good old spanking, sat in there, cried for probably 10 or 15 minutes, and I never got a swat after that, though. So I must assume it did do something. Yeah. Not that I actually, personally, I think me and my husband have talked about it, and we decided that, we feel like if there was going to be discipline, it would be something more like you don't get a donut.
Right.
We go home directly after. There's no playing with your friends or anything, and then you get a good talking to, but not the physical. But you might have some children who they may need that one time, and that's it. You have the child that is like the constant.
Well, and you know your kids,
right?
And you know the one that does need it. That you just know.
And I think age has a lot to do with it too. If they're over 3, I don't think. Sometimes 2-year-olds just need to get spanked. I mean, I'm sorry.
Smacked out of it.
But it's just you need to get their attention, and that's sometimes the only way.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I recommend it, but I think
a swat.
If you have to, then
and take them outside.
Oh no,
don't do
never
it in the cry room or in the church,
or in the vestibule. We can still hear it.
Right? Take them outside and let them cry a little bit. And it's not often. It's when they're being really bad. They should know that they're gonna get in trouble.
And it's when you got a bunch of kids, it is a lesson for everyone. Everyone sees it and everyone knows. So it sometimes it's just necessary. Kill a whole bunch of birds with one one spank.
You don't want to get spanked.
No. I'm just looking to see if there's anything I'm missing. Is there anything that you guys can think of that we haven't touched on? I have to tell you a funny quote though before I forget it. That somebody told me that there was a parish, true story. There was a parish, and I don't know what parish, that was so full of loud and crying children that the priest suggested that he would offer Mass in the cry room because that's where it was so quiet. It was the quietest. But so it's like, we don't want to be guilty of that happening in our churches, because the priests are people too. I mean, and not to mention, the people around you too. You want to make sure that they can concentrate during Mass. Just like we want to, God willing, we ever get old enough children that we can actually follow Mass again. But the priests are people too, and they can get distracted, and it's I guess it's a little bit of an insult to the dignity of the Mass when you feel like, gosh, are people even trying? You know, you should be trying. I mean, it's not your living room. It's so important. I mean, we're there for our Lord. I mean, we're there for Jesus, and we're all up to it. I mean, it's hard. I know. I got it. Been there. It's never ending, is what it is, but it's worth it. I mean, you got to keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, and God bless the little stinkers, though. They can learn.
I think one more thing too. It's nice to be able to do physical things like putting money into the collection, lighting candles, visiting statues, Stations of the Cross, just things that aren't sitting in the pew. It's really helpful because it just makes it come to life more. They feel like they're participating and they want to do those extra things, and it makes it more of a special, like, you know, they can feel it. It's more of like something they can touch and grasp.
Versus sitting in the very back. No, I love to be able to, whether it's after mass for a second when I or if it's sometimes, you know, the weekday mass and we can get there before anyone gets in. I love to bring them in and just let them walk straight up to the communion rail and be able to tell them, like, yeah, that's Jesus's house. He's right there. And be able to discuss in church and show them, obviously quietly still, but, you know, whispering and explaining to them, showing them things like the candle, you know, talking about that stuff that you can't do during mass. So doing that extracurricular, I think, can make mass, the church atmosphere, not so I'm here, Jesus is there, but like, no, Jesus is here, you know.
Right. And then that level of comfort and love and familiarity.
Cool. Yeah. My son the other day, we had this holy card of Saint Michael, and he's like, "Sup, Michael?" So maybe not quite that familiar, but you want them to love the saints and the angels, and you know, if you can make it like they're friends, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and sit next to Saint Michael's window. Hey, yeah. Well, I think I can't think of anything else. Is there anything that we've missed talking about that
I think
I can think of.
I think that's pretty much.
I think
probably
it's
something, but
probably
we'll think of it right after
as soon as we're
stop.
finished. Yeah, I know. Well, it's there is almost nothing more important we can do. I mean, it's the Mass is the most important thing in our faith, and teaching our children to behave, and behave is such a. We want them to behave, but we want to behave because for the right reasons, because they love our Lord, and because they understand that the church is in a really, really special place, you know. And I think if we can teach them that it's a really special place, then that carries out into the rest of their spiritual life, you know, for the rest of their lives, and that the church is a place that they want to be, you know, that they won't grow up and feel comfortable not going to mass. You would want it to feel like the most weird thing in the world to grow up and imagine not to mass on Sunday. Why wouldn't you go to mass on Sunday? That's the best thing, you know. You want that in their little hearts. So I think that starts when they're infants. It starts when they're 2, you know, when little by little by little. But so I think it's an important thing to talk about. You know, and all of our different levels of momdom. But yeah, so thanks, girls. Thank you, and thank you for joining us on our. We're gonna go get our tea now.
or coffee, or
little tea party, coffee clutch. But yeah, thank you, and do like, subscribe, hit the bell, and thank you for listening, and God bless.
You've been listening to the Catholic Family Podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please share it with your friends and family. You can support the production on Patreon and PayPal, and you can reach Kevin at kevin89davis@gmail.com. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam. All for the greater glory of God.